Irashaimase. Hello and welcome to Fitaurus Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fitaurus. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this Saturday we have Boiling Bolt, a twin-stick shoot 'em up recently released on multiple platforms. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. So here we find ourselves at the main menu of Boiling Bolt. So there's several game modes we could possibly play as. Arcade, which is what we'll be looking at. Arcade basically allows us to go and play through all the stages in the game back to back. Free Run lets us play through any stage we've completed with just the stage itself. Training, pretty straightforward there. You play through the tutorial the first time you fire up Arcade, so that's just allowing you to go and replay it. And then there's also challenges, which are small 30-second challenges, which are different things like survive without getting shot, use just your main weapon, that sort of thing. There's also this shop. In this shop, we have all these upgrades we can buy for our ship. But as I scroll down through the list, you might notice over there in the attributes that for every increase you have, past a certain point, you have all these negative stats being attributed to the other skills or stats that you have. And that can be a little bit problematic. So if you want to make something strong, you're going to be nerfing all the other aspects of your ship. So, jumping into arcade mode, we see our skill selection here. So those upgrades you can buy in the shop, you can equip 3 of them. And as I was going and saying, is if you're trying to increase one particular stat, you're going to be nerfing the other stats really, really substantially. And I don't really feel it's worth it. So it's best to kind of just go at like base power or just a little bit above with the upgrades that are like +1 but no, let's see, minuses to other stats. And that's frustrating. There's a lot of promise here in this skill selection, but in the end, the way that it is goes and nerfs itself. There is also a couple other upgrades that don't necessarily impact stats but change some things about your ship. Well, actually a couple of them do impact stats, so forget I said that. In this case, I went with a spread shot. The spread shot allows me to have a 3-way shot rather than just a straight shot, and there's some certain advantages to that. Once you have your skills selected though, you go and press the start button, you're ready to go, you press start, and you're into the game. It is possible to go and play co-op, so there is that plus to the game itself, although I have not experienced or played around with that. So there is story involved in this. We're basically being attacked by these enemies, where these 2 characters, or specifically the character in the bottom, June, who's flying the Boiling Bolt. And off we go. So the movement is basically your standard. It's kind of like a defender type. Things will go and wrap around, but we're moving on this awesome ribbon of light, as it were. So we are restricted to that ribbon, but it gives us pretty awesome free range to move around. And it even wraps around the stage, providing some really neat effects. So graphically, that's really neat. We also have a shot. If we didn't have the 3-way, it would be a straight one shot that would go and fire to the left or to the right of us. But because it's the 3-way, we have the ability to fire in all 360 degrees around us. We also have 4 special weapons that we always have by default. So those special weapons are the Plasma Whip, the Ice Barrier. So the Plasma Whip is straightforward. The Ice Barrier, what it does is it forms a barrier around us that temporarily makes us invulnerable, and then once it the timer runs out on that, we get an explosion that deals damage around us. Then there's also this Lightning Arc, which will hit up to 3 enemies inside the cone that we fire out there. And then this Warp Bomb, which we can fire once we release the button. It throws out this wormhole, or black hole, that sucks in small enemies and deals damage when it explodes. We have to be careful when using that though, because it will suck us in as well. It doesn't destroy us, but if we were to get hit by enemies getting sucked into it, then we would die. We also have the ability to dash. And the dash is really important as it brings us to how we can obtain high scores in the game. So if you dash when you're close to an enemy or a shot, you will activate a bullet time. When you're going through the training, it's like, this ship's special ability, bullet time! It's like, it's not really original. One of the things that's interesting about bullet time, though, is you the multiplier you get, which you might have seen under the life and the special weapon indicators in the top left, get insane. So if we destroy an enemy I'm trying to get into bullet time and not managing it very well. If we destroy an enemy while in bullet time, the amount of multiplier we get for destroying them is insane. And we're also temporarily invulnerable when we dash. That's a dodge. So I've been able to go and get myself up to 397 multiplier, and we can take that even further. If I didn't die there. And that's how you score big points in Boiling Bolt, is use of the dash and the bullet time to get huge multipliers. And it's not really that hard to go and build up those multipliers. So although it's like says that mastering the dash is the key to getting high scores, with just a little bit of practice and understanding of how it works, you can get up huge multipliers relatively easy. You do have an indicator around your ship that will glow red when you are close enough to either an enemy or a bullet to kick that off. It is easier, I feel, to go and use enemies as they move slower than the bullets that are coming at us. So let's see how high we can get our multiplier here. There is also a timed element to the stage. We get more points for the faster we defeat the stage itself, and that's part of why I feel upgrading, if you're decreasing your speed or if you're decreasing your defense. And interestingly enough, the defense doesn't actually relate to the actual defense itself. It's basically our lives. So the more defense you have, the more one-ups you have. Kind of it's different that way. There we go. Now we're up to 999 multiplier. And it was a relatively quick and easy process to get there. And, well, that's basically what we have as far as the basics and some of the advanced strategy as well of Boiling Bolt. So, the game itself, progression-wise, you might have noticed we have those little sections, as the game even refers to them, Section 1, Section 2, and Section 3. Some of the other stages only have like 2 sections, and they do vary from stage to stage as to how they function. But essentially, it's just a matter of coming into a section, we have barriers on either side of us, and then enemies will spawn in, go in left to right or right to left, and we have to defeat them in order to progress. And then here we have a section where we just have to survive an onslaught of enemies until we've unlocked our boss fight, which should be momentarily here. I do like this boss's intro. The look here as we're looking up the spire as this boss comes down is really neat. So there is a dynamic camera that's available in the game itself that I have turned off. So I feel it makes it rather difficult to go and see what you're doing. A lot of times it will move the camera to look at enemies that are incoming, but moves the camera away from the direction that you're looking. So this boss fight is kind of interesting. So this giant serpent has the fire beam that it goes and fires, but it telegraphs it pretty well. So you have plenty of time to dodge and get out of the way. There's also steam that's being blown out of those 2 nozzles, which blow us back, potentially into that barrier, which would kill us. So here it's easiest to use the plasma whip, if we can get in close range and just pelt the boss's core until, bam, it's dead. And we get a little bit more story. The battle is in vain, and she'll be back. Some cutscenes at the end, and we get our final score tally. Victory! Combo 999. I haven't quite figured out how the timer bonus works. Once you have that, if it were the first time playing through it, you would unlock several of the other modes, but now we just move on to stage 2. here we're trying to find a crystal to help our village against the onslaught of invaders. So we're introduced to a few new enemy types here, but for the most part, it's a lot of what we've already seen. That seems to be the case throughout the game itself, is once we've hit the 4th stage, and there are 5 stages total. I believe the last one, from the looks of it, is just a simple, well, there's not necessarily anything simple about it, but it's just a boss fight. I'm not quite handling this one the way I want to be. One thing that is neat about this stage is the bullets will bounce off the crystals in unique and interesting ways. As we progress through the stage, we have to go and get this door open, and we can admire these beautiful crystal caverns. And that's basically Boiling Bolt. So, in a nutshell, minus flavors. Well, I'm really frustrated by the upgrade system that the game goes and has. I feel like it has a lot of promise, but it's just nerfed by how extreme the swings are in your upgrades. So you can go and upgrade your ship ever so incrementally, but beyond that, there's not really much point to it. And then the game itself just feels dull, for a lack of a better way of putting it. The combo system is easy to master, and there's really not a whole lot to it. The gameplay itself is relatively straightforward without a whole lot of impact. But on the plus flavor side of things, there are the boss fights. They're each, of course, unique, and they bring something different to the table. But even after a couple tries, they themselves would start to get dull as well, as although for the first time figuring out what's going on might be interesting, there's not really enough there. Then this stage in particular, right here, is a perfect place to go and note that there are the backgrounds, which are just spectacularly beautiful. I love the way the game's background aesthetic is. The mech design could be a little bit better. So overall, I'm gonna rate Boiling Bolt as a relatively bland, flavorless dish. It just lacks the balance to give it a good gaming experience. There's some interesting systems at work here, but with its shorter length and frustrating systems that are present, I don't consider it worth your time. Well, that'll just about wrap it up for this week's episode of Shoot 'Em Up Saturday. This is also the final episode of 2017, so if you're watching this as the video goes up, I want to wish you a Happy New Year. And I hope to have your support again in 2018. As always, I want to thank you so much for coming out and joining me for Shoot 'Em Up Saturday this week, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.